In this episode of MPTV, we sit down with David Bloom of the Capriotti's brand to talk about an emerging brand and what it's like to take it to the next level. We're also going to talk about his experience as a franchise owner and how that's helped him shape this company. And we're going to dig into a little bit of technology and how the big guys and little guys can play on the same level. Let's go check it out. What's up? It's Matt, MPTV. We're on the road. We're in Las Vegas, Nevada. We're here for another episode to talk to somebody in the business that knows it better than anybody with your experience. Mr. David Bloom, Capriotti's. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Welcome to Vegas.
Thank you. Thanks for having us out here. So I guess for the audience, introduce yourself. Tell us a little about what you do.
David Bloom, Chief Operating and Chief Development Officer for both Capriotti's and Wing Zone.
Okay. And your background in the business, I know you got a long history, but how many years and some of the things you've done, the highlights?
Decades. So it's taken me, I'm obviously a slow learner. It's taken me a long time to learn, the business, but I've been in it for years, really from every aspect. I kind of grew up in New York and have worked in this business and other industries globally for, like I said, decades.
Yeah.
So. But I would say I kind of learned the franchise business as a franchisee first. I was one of the largest franchisees of Quiznos when they first started. It started when there were only 18 restaurants. My partners and I became the largest franchisees and the largest area developers. And then I was part of the global development team and left when the company sold, and we were at 5,000 restaurants in 28 countries. And so I really learned how to grow a brand at scale there, and have done it several times since and really enjoy it.
So going back to that franchisee experience, I get a chance to talk to a lot of guys your level and also a lot of one location franchise owners. And there's a lot of brands out there that there's a deep disconnect between that franchisee and corporate.
Yeah, it's a great point. One of the things that does differentiate us is we believe in owning and operating the brands that we franchise. So we're one of the largest. Actually, the guys that own this restaurant have, I think this is number 10 for them, number 11, and they own other brands. And a lot of our franchisees are large multi-unit operators, not just of Capriotti's, but of other brands as well. And we are in that same business. So we've got about 18 or 20 Capriotti's today. We're also in a bunch of non-stadiums and arenas. And when we acquired Wing Zone at the end of last year, beginning of this year, that was one of our stated plans, was we're going to be the largest franchisee, so to speak, of Wing Zone very quickly. So we're signing leases and opening stores here in Vegas as fast as we can. Because I think you're right, you got to be in the same business. You got to be aligned. It also is where we do all of our testing and development, where we do all of our training, and really kind of get to play with all the processes and really just make sure that we're feeling the same things that our franchisees. So if food cost goes up a point, or our insurance, goes up by half a point, or utilities, or cost to open versus operate, and sort of that whole ROI model, it means we're really, really in tune with it, and hopefully we're actually the best at it, so we can teach other people how to be great at it. So it's I think way too uncommon to see that. A lot of brands don't do that, and we're big believers in it.
I had a conversation, probably 6-7 months ago. I had a franchisee that reached out looking for advice. And so I went through some of the corporate ladders to talk to people to see how we could help them. And I found out that this particular corporate company had no locations. And I'm not a restaurant operator, but I want to know if I'm a franchisee that somebody's been in the same trench I'm in, and they get it.
Yeah, I just had a call this morning with a guy. He's, I won't name brand names or names, but he's joining us from an automotive franchise. He's been in the restaurant business before and ran restaurants successfully, but he's got a very high-performing automotive franchise today. And the reason he's joining us is because the number one operator in that automotive company is also now has recently opened a Capriotti's, is already opening number 2 and 3. And they're great performers in these other companies, but those other companies don't own and operate any automotive stores, and they I have to do all the testing. I have to
Yeah.
figure everything out. I'm kind of on my own out here, bringing the innovation back to the brand instead of the brand bringing me
Yep.
the innovation. And it's just people don't understand how critical it is, but it is. We're able to test and innovate everything from technology to products to processes to financial, accounting services to insurance programs, and do it first on our nickel. And we probably have 20 different innovations in test, artificial intelligence on the phone ordering, self-ordering kiosks and new menu items, and really making sure that what we're focused on is going to deliver big results, not just little tweaks, but actually level up the business so our franchise partners and us can do more business and make more money every year. And we've been very fortunate in being able to do that. So
A lot of franchisees are looking for not one store, but 5, 10, 15. And you started, like you said, back in Quiznos. What were some of the things you and your partners did there that allowed you to go from being a couple location to multi and successful?
Well, we had all had a certain amount of success before getting into that business. So even though we had a lot to learn and we had lots of lessons to learn, that I didn't know anything about real estate. I didn't know a lot about a lot of things that I really did need to know about. But number one, I would say picking the right franchise is critical. Yeah. And we've just talked about, I think one of the caveats should be don't get into business with anybody that's not in the business. Because you're going to be at odds long term. You're heading in separate directions. So I think that's number one. Number two, having the capital plan in place and realizing, at some point you get a couple, 2, 3 stores open and you can self-fund. But in the early years, you're opening up stores so fast, you've got to have the capital available ready to do that. So having the right capital stack. And then thirdly, I would just say, having a passion for the business. Like, you've got to love it. You're going to, you run your company and you guys are, I know these guys really, pretty well. And a lot of it is just passion. You get up every day and go, hey, I'm going to do it better than anybody else and bigger than anybody else. And that gets you through those tough times and gives you the grit that you're going to need to build a really successful enterprise. So.
And the point you made about somebody that's in the right franchise, I was at again, I won't mention this franchise, this isn't even a restaurant, 10 years ago, a company we did some consulting for said, hey, I want you to go to our franchise conference with us. Okay. So I come out here to Vegas, and we're at the Bellagio, and we got this conference there. And the company at that time had about 5,000 locations in the U.S., and it was a split. 2,500 were corporate, 2,500 were franchise.
Huh.
And so I'm in the
crowd.
crowd.
Now I'm trying to guess which one.
I'll tell you offline.
Okay.
But I'm in the crowd, and I had known that the online sales of this retailer all went to corporate. And so the guy gets up, new marketing director gets up, and he's on stage, and I'm helping consult with the marketing, and he's on stage to only franchises, and he's talking about how the social media is driving traffic to their website, and the online sales are crushing it. And it's like, it's just a great story, but I look at my client, I go, you don't get any of the money from online, right? He goes, no, why this moron is up here touting this, but it blew me away because I started paying attention at conference, and there were all these breakaways of franchisees on their own, just irate about everything, and their whole thing was they're not in it with us.
Yeah, and I forget which brand it was, but I heard a kind of similar story, but the reverse outcome where the franchisor said, we have this huge online opportunity, and we need to figure out a way to, I think it was Dunkin' actually, it was Dunkin' Brands when they launched their Keurig business. Yep. And they decided that 50% of those revenues would go to the franchisees.
That's awesome.
And they developed that plan in concert with the franchisees, Franchise Advisory Council. And so franchisees were like, yeah, great, we love to see the growth of the brand, and now we're benefiting and you're benefiting. And it has to be win-win, right? Like, if you're playing win-lose, it's going to be a short-term game and it's going to collapse. Yep. And so, unfortunately, I've seen it. I've been a part of it. Quiznos ended up pretty rough, after we left, and I think that's because, some of that alignment, started to disappear, and then eventually the ownership group wants to go this way, and the franchisees want to go that way, and it doesn't work long term. So.
What about markets? So I got a friend of mine that recently opened a restaurant in a market. He's committed to 4 or 5 locations. I don't know that he's funded for 4 or 5, honestly. but he's the only store in a market. There's not a brand, one of those brands around him for 10 hours.
Yeah.
And I remember telling, after he did this, I'm like, dude, nobody knows what this is. Like, this might be the greatest sandwich in the world, and this isn't a sandwich shop. It might be the greatest product in those other 5 cities.
Yeah.
But you're in a market, you better have the capital to get those 4 stores, otherwise you never get mass.
I think that's true, but I also think that goes back to the franchisor has to prove first that they know how to go into new markets.
Okay.
We go into new markets literally every day. We just opened in the last 6 months in Colorado and Tampa, South Carolina,
Charlotte, I saw Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, and Frisco, Texas. All record sales, only store in their market,
Okay.
and holding those sales. But we've learned how to do that over time, and frankly, we've had to kind of fund that learning by over-investing in marketing in particular to figure out how do we get that out there. And part of what we actually had to learn was how not to open too big.
Okay.
Because we would crush the franchisee. They couldn't handle the revenue. And so we had to learn how to, instead of doing like a 1-month marketing grand opening, spread it over 6 months.
Okay.
And we still open to crazy numbers, frankly, bigger numbers than we ever thought we would. But we do so with a plan that says, let's do this instead of this, and then have bad service and dive off. So a lot of it, again, I think is incumbent on the franchisor to figure out how to do this in a way that's manageable, and you can build a team and you can sustain growth, and then go on to store 2, 3, and 4. So that took us time. Again, Capriotti's been around for 40 years. Wing Zone's been around for 27 years. These are not overnight success stories, right? And I think that's one issue that a lot of people maybe kind of get carried away with is there are a lot of brands out there that are more of what I would call a fad.
Yeah.
And I think you're making a long-term investment when you invest in a franchise. You've got to think about, okay, but what about 5 years and 10 years from now? Are people still eating this or doing this? Or is it more of like, when the next thing comes along, people are going to move on to that? So.
It's like the friends of mine in the nightclub business. They open up for 2 years.
Yeah.
They know they got 1 or 2 years.
They know it though.
Yeah.
They're like, I got 2 years to pay this thing off, get my return, and then I might stay in the same spot, but it's a completely, I mean, Vegas is famous for that, right? Like, every year and a half, new brand, new this, new that. And especially today in the, age of where celebrities are driving, eyeballs to brands, they know that same thing. We have a lot of friends that are in that business, and they know their celebrities are good for about a year and a half or 2 years. But there are also other celebrity investors, and I would say like Shaq, who's big here, Drew Brees, who we're, as a brand and as an investor group we're friends with. Those guys, they invest for the long term, and they're actually part of the business. They enhance the business, and they do so in a way that I think is really incredible.
Okay, break time. Restaurant owners, you're watching MPTV, so you're obviously interested in increasing your sales and profits. But what if I told you you could eliminate the hope and pray out of your marketing? You could spend money and actually see results. Most marketing starts with attention, like a billboard. The problem is that attention leads nowhere. That's why we created the ROI Engine Restaurant Program. We take attention and gain huge engagement, whether it's in-store or online. We help you build a database with deep customer information that's comprised of email, cell phone, and birthday. And then we drive them into the restaurant with trackable results. Yes, results you can actually see. If you're interested and want to have a conversation, check out restaurantmarketingthatworks.com. Worst case scenario, you get a lot of great ideas. Now back to the show.
So one thing I'm passionate about, I know you are as well, is technology. And the one thing that excites me is I remember when we had our boat dealership, whatever that was, the mid-2000s, it was 75 to 100 grand to get a new server for our point of sale. And it was crazy numbers to make things. And now today, like back then, you had to be a big boy to have that tech. Today, you could have a 1 location independent restaurant. Has a lot of opportunity for their tech stack within marketing and running their operations.
Yeah, I'd say the difficulty today, though, is not the cost. It's the understanding and integration of all the technologies. Okay. So our technology team is the size, our technology team is bigger than the entire Wing Zone corporate staff when we acquired them.
Wow.
And our marketing team is bigger than they were, and our operations and training. So there's so much complexity and making all this stuff work together in so many pieces, because you have the loyalty and consumer side of things, you have the the CRM side of things, you have the sort of acquisition of new customers, and like when you walk in, how you acquiring their, are they are you getting their their Wi-Fi, are you getting their information when they're signing up for your loyalty, or when they're paying for your transaction, are you geofencing their location? And does all that all that information get appended in one place and then automatically feed and track that person to see how often are they coming and what do they like to eat? And I'll actually tell you, Vegas is probably, the casinos are probably the very best at that in the world, where they know what show you would like to come to, what offers turn you on, when you like to travel, what to offer you, and they motivate people, incentivize people to come here with very targeted offers, and that's how they drive business. And so this is actually a great town as an example, but it's all technology behind the scene. It's not somebody tracking you, right? Like, it's all AI and it's all in the cloud. And so our business, I think in particular, has become at least 30 or 40% a technology company versus just a restaurant company.
Along the technology side, so I started working 2 weeks ago at a pizza restaurant. I took a part-time job with one of our clients because I'd always worked around the restaurant business, and I'd sat in showrooms, I've sat in kitchens. When I was listening to a friend of mine, David Scott Peters, speak about a month ago at an event in South Carolina, and he's talking about his experience of serving customers. And I thought, I've never served a customer. So I took a job, and I did 2 days last week. I'm doing 2 to 3 days every week. And my goal is to honestly understand for the operator that interaction. Like you said, how to get somebody's data, how to have a conversation. I was watching last week, and he's like, hey, you want the loyalty card? No, okay. And seeing those things, what are some of the things you've done to educate your operators so they can pass it down to the cashiers and the front line workers?
A good example is, and we have to be, as a franchisor, have to be careful about the line between employer and franchisor. There's a lot of labor relations stuff around that, but we've actually invested in technology that allows us to gamify the training directly for the employees in the franchisee shop, and create incentives and contests from one shop to another, and really reward people engaging in those really cool training programs. Because even the way you deliver training today versus 5 years ago is dramatically different. So again, it's an area where we really leverage technology to deliver that, to kind of be able to go directly to the staff, to empower them to do the kind of things, but really to teach them and make it a way that's fun and engaging on their smartphones, in a way that employees today want to be. They don't want to be sitting, they're not opening a manual, and they're not sitting at a computer in the back. They're just not. So the way we do that is really changing. It's not even just relying on the franchisee to do that, who's got lots of other stuff going on in their life. Like, how do we support them in hiring? Like, we're launching predictive indexing into our talent brief program, which is our HR onboarding program, to help them make better decisions about who's going to be a good fit in their business from both a cognitive and a behavioral standpoint automatically. And you just got to make it simpler. You got to make stuff easier for people, not harder. And unfortunately, every time you think you're bringing a new great idea to the table, you're often bringing more complexity into an already complex environment. So we kind of look at it the other way. It was like, how do we take this off their shoulders? How do we bring them, processes or products or platforms and services that are really affordable, that we can do at scale and actually help do it for them? Because they don't have more time in the day. They're out opening more restaurants. They're looking for real estate. They're sponsoring stuff. They're dealing with a myriad of things.
Yeah.
So it's tricky, and we have to do a lot of it for them, frankly, or in a way that just it empowers or enables them, with them giving them more work to do.
Or it makes it easier on the people doing the training, the employees. You mentioned having it all smartphone based. I mean, it's all. We had something recently that came through. My daughter's a 19-year-old in college, and something came through recently that she had to do that wasn't on the phone. She was like, "What do I do?" And she's like you said, she doesn't have a desktop computer somewhere. It's all on her phone.
Which, I do sit in front of a computer or a laptop all day long. And so I'm kind of used to it, but I'm traveling with people all the time, and they're looking at, they're making decisions on spreadsheet, and they're just looking at their phone. That's not actually how I work, but that is how a lot of people work. And so I think there's kind of a disconnect sometimes with the people that lead the company and the people that actually work in the company, at every level. And those people are much, much more technology enabled often than leadership is. And so you got to, within your leadership team, like our president has a degree in computer science, mathematics, and an MBA. And a lot of us on the senior team have run technology enabled companies before. And so I think but even I, with all that background, I often sit in meetings with vendors and technology companies. I was in one yesterday. People that have been in business for maybe 10 years, not 30, and they are light years ahead of us. And so getting the right partners is absolutely critical, and partnering with the right people that have the same resources and are in it for the long run is really, really critical.
Restaurant owners, did you know Matt has free online marketing courses that teach you how to successfully market your restaurant? Email support@mattplapp.com to get access to the courses and a free social media content calendar.
Awesome. Well, I love to end every podcast with a simple question. You're like a lot of entrepreneurs and people in the restaurant space. It's fast moving. You got your phone. I turned my phone on airplane mode so nobody would disturb this. What do you do to put you on airplane mode? What's something you do to get your mind right and maybe spend time with the family or outdoors?
I have a grandson.
Okay.
New grandson. Thank you. That's kind of the joy of our lives. And so when I'm with him, I block out the world. Like, could it be 20 minutes? But when I'm with him, I'm like, I don't care what's happening. Number one. Number two, especially during COVID, I decided I always wanted to learn a musical instrument, so I picked up guitar. Okay. And now I have 3 guitars. And my lessons are all on the mobile phone. I don't go anywhere to do it, and I'm not good. So, but that's given me like a creative outlet that I needed to just not be working all the time. So I think you kind of, I'm not a believer in what I would call, people call a balanced life. I think it's very hard to have balance, but I think you can create what's called a harmonized life, where the things you do, empower the other things you do. So I will probably always suck at golf, and I'm probably never going to be in great shape. But the things that I do, my family and whatnot, that gives me the energy and it gives me the desire, frankly, the passion to keep providing more and more for them and for other people around me and people I work with. So as long as everything's kind of symbiotic or aligned, I think you're in good shape. It's when this thing might be great and fun, but it actually kind of sucks energy from all these other things, that's where you get in trouble. So I try and make sure everything's kind of feeding or congruent, I guess is the word I would look for.
Cool. Well, I love it. Well, I appreciate your time.
That was great. I really enjoyed this. Thank you. And I know you guys are driving all around the country in that big orange van of yours out there. Like, I don't have to wonder if they're here. They're definitely here.
We're here. You see us, we pull up. That's number 1 of 2. There's 2 of them right now. There's East Coast, West Coast. The goal's 50 of them in 5 to 7 years to travel the country and tell the story of restaurant operators.
Well, I can say I was there. What number van is this?
Number 2.
No, number 2. I was like, well, actually, and I spoke to you guys about a year ago, I think it was. I was like, so I'm officially going to claim I was there when you just had 1.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be like, I knew them when they had 1.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to getting a sandwich after this. That's all we've got for this episode of MPTV. We'll see you next time.
Great. Thanks. Bye-bye.